Okay, so this was originally called a Beckman State of the Beckman Address, and I decided that actually I'd much rather have a discussion. And so the purpose is really to get information out to everyone and to answer any questions that anyone might have. And so the ground rules are very simple. Please, at any time, feel free to ask a question if you have one. I'm happy to stop and take a drink of water. This is the end of the semester virus that's caught up to me, so I'm going to struggle to make it through this anyway. So please bear with me, and again, please, this is supposed to be interactive and a dialogue. A couple of, I guess 2 years ago now, at one of the reviews of the main research theme, one of the comments was made, we really could do more to get information out to the people in Beckman. And so this is one of our venues by which we're trying to do that, and there will be some other ones as well. But I think internal communication is really critically important. And by the way, we're, sorry, the fluctuation in the sound here, streaming live to YouTube, so it's even potential. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but there's potentially other viewers who are not in the room. So if you do ask a question, you can raise your hand, and we do have mics up here. So I have material prepared. Some of it is intended to plant some seeds in your mind, and probably you don't have an immediate response. Other things are trigger points to try to get you to realize that, oh, there's things I should be doing right now that can make the Beckman Institute better, and really to have a greater impact. There's some kind of, I guess, educational component to this presentation as well. So let me start by saying what I think really makes Beckman great. I told the staff this the other day. I'm going to be completely wear it on my sleeve here. You know, the faculty are mostly concerned about making their own name for themselves, and of course, along with that comes notoriety to the Beckman Institute, but it's really the staff that's out there doing everything they possibly can to make the Beckman great. We have about 50 staff. They cover everything from the business to the admin, operations, the cafeteria. And for all the faculty, I would just encourage you right now and every time you get an opportunity. So please join me in thanking the staff for all that they do for us. It's really been a pleasure to work with them. They're really exceptional, dedicated people. Getting email from, I'll just say it right here, Carol last night sent an email at something like 10:30 working on a report. People are dedicated and really want to see this place thrive and prosper and continue to move forward. So that really brings me to the first slide, which is what I'm calling Beckman 1.0. And I just encourage you, here's one of the seeds to plant. What does Beckman 2.0 look like? If 1.0 was all about trying to define interdisciplinary research under this idea that we can do better by combining our disparate activities and solve big problems, how do we move that boundary forward and become really what interdisciplinary research is going to be in 20 years from now? So the seed to plant in your mind is, what does Beckman Institute look like 20 years from now? Does it look like exactly what you know it as today, or will it evolve in some new and interesting way? What will it mean to really push the boundaries of interdisciplinary research, interdisciplinary science, big problems that are solved? How do we do it better? How do we do it better internally? How do we do it better by partnering externally as well, both on campus and off campus? Those are certainly the campus itself is very interested in our interdisciplinary research institutes. You might see it disguised in some different kind of language. For example, discipline convergence is one of the terms that are being thrown out there. I don't think it's really much different than what we do right now in this 2014 NRC report describes. But the point I'm trying to make is that I think we all now know that the Beckman Institute was established as an interdisciplinary center at a time when interdisciplinary wasn't a common thing, but it's becoming obviously much more common. And how do we distinguish ourselves, and how do we be pushing the boundaries of what that means to go forward? So a couple of points that I'll just highlight today. Really, I'll be talking about our external reviews and their importance and how they are shaping the way we are. I would call that evolutionary progress as opposed to revolutionary progress, but it's nonetheless very important, and it's been very dynamic. And sort of we've got the wheels set in motion for a review stream, and I'll mention that. I'll briefly mention what the current structure of the different themes are, and then I'll talk about some really serious stuff, which I think is more or less the education side of things. The budget impasse, many of you read yesterday's News Gazette, and if it didn't strike home before then, I'm sure that was a pretty humbling kind of article that clearly shows some of the issues that the campus is facing, and I'll tell you how they're affecting Beckman and what kind of things we can begin to think about doing to address our situation here. I've been handing out, I think Maeve has been handing out postcards about our facilities and administration, our F&A costs distribution, and how we need to think about our grant dollars as faculty running through the Beckman and what kind of consequences it has if we just have our research here but run grants through our home units or elsewhere, and how that doesn't impact our home departments in any way, whether they're here or whether they're running through the Beckman Institute, but it certainly affects the Beckman Institute itself. Another component of sort of the educational aspect that I want information that I'd like to impact all of you with is that I think we can do more to make sure that we're acknowledging the Beckman Institute every opportunity we get in our talks, obviously in papers that we publish with an affiliation to the Beckman Institute. And then critically important, because it's being asked more, is acknowledgement of our shared central facilities. And so I'll briefly point to you and really ask those of you who are authoring papers, the graduate students and postdocs, and obviously the PIs who are shepherding those papers through to make sure that the acknowledgments and affiliations are rightly taken care of, both on our publications, but also in the presentations that we give. And I'll tell you a little bit about, in spite of the fact that, this is such a great and beautiful building, there is need for input of resources to it, and we have to find those resources, and we have to, we have a building that's more than 25 years old now, and again, if I ask you to plant the seed in your mind, what's it going to look like 20 years from now? Well, it's going to not be such a healthy-looking building if we don't put resources into it. And I'll tell you about those resources and what some of the immediate plans are, but also to tell you that we're really looking for input from everyone on this. Things from, what should be the optimal layout of the cubicle farms on the second, third, fourth, and fifth floor to what we might think about the atrium as a more functional space instead of just a formal space that maybe is nice to sit in one corner of and eat our lunch at, but maybe there's opportunities to make it a much more working group space that still doesn't detract from its beauty, but I think still moves us forward in terms of how we can make it functionally useful. And so I'll tell you a little bit about that. Very early planning ideas from conversations with actually Andy Visano, the original designer, architect of the Beckman Institute. I'll end with the upcoming events, but let me start. if nobody has any questions right off the bat, by saying the wheels are in motion for the next several years of a regular cycle of the reviews of our three main research themes, as well as the Beckman Institute programs as a whole. So in 2013, we started with an all Beckman-wide review, and that really is a review of things like our shared facilities, the postdoctoral and graduate student program, and any other sort of an overarching view of the Beckman Institute. And then in 2015, we began again the regular cycle of external reviews of the main research themes, and HCII was combined with biological intelligence as it became apparent that there was a strong overlap between those two main research themes. And so that was October of 2015, and a year followed. There was a lot of work that went into the front end of that review prior to the review, and then a year followed of reorganization. And thanks a lot to Liz Steinmorrow and Kara Fedemeyer, who really instrumented a reorganization of what the new intelligence systems theme looks like. And so it's been a dynamic activity, really thinking about the group boundaries shouldn't be so rigid. There should be a lot more opportunity for flexibility. In this year, in October, with planning that began, well, actually probably a year beforehand, with getting the review committee lined up and then really active in May, starting in May of 2016, the integrative imaging group underwent, or theme underwent its review. And it too was a very rigorous review with a lot of very good suggestions. And thanks a lot to Steve Bopart and Jipe. Both of them have now begun that process of really thinking about how to move forward with the suggestions from the review committee to reorganize as it makes sense, to strengthen areas that need to be strengthened. We heard a lot of suggestions about the need for very tight coupling with the College of Medicine as the College of Medicine comes on board, and how the imaging technology is going to be such an important part of that, and how Beckman has such a stronghold in that space that there ought to be very tight connection between the College of Medicine and the Beckman Institute going forward, because of the relationships that exist with Carl and because of the science and research that's being done here. And so that was a very productive review, but the business isn't finished yet. We have a lot of work to do, and I know that Steve and Jipe are really getting set to put the wheels in motion to begin to think about how they're going to make the most out of the suggestions that came from the review committee. And we're starting to put together for 2017, October, I don't remember, I think it's the third week in October, the molecular and electronic main research theme. As the title of this slide says, it's really what makes us sharp. I think even now I'm getting a sense for the main research theme that I've been involved in most closely, how we really need to begin to prepare for this, to take it seriously. We'll get the most out of it if we put the most into it. And so that activity is beginning, and as you can see, we'll then in 2018, 5 years after the initial review, take a look at the Beckman-wide programs and keep that cycle going, and continue it until there's been some either major reorganization, I guess, and this timeline no longer makes sense. It's a great activity, a 2-day event. I was very heavily involved in the imaging review, and I can say everyone took it extremely seriously. It has a really useful function. People, most obviously what happens in terms of it's an opportunity to go through your roster, if nothing else, and people who haven't been so involved tend to not participate and maybe even bow out, and those who have a real deep commitment to Beckman and are heavily involved in Beckman take it very seriously, and it shows. And the level of the review, was really there was a lot of praise for the work that's going on here. So those are our reviews, and this is basically, as the title of this slide says, the evolving research portfolio. It's definitely one that I would say might see some major disruption at some time. I don't know. That was the seed that I planted in thinking about what is Beckman 2.0 and how does maybe the College of Medicine integrate into all this. But the evolving activity has been a pretty rapid evolution in the case of intelligent systems. Now we have 7 what are research groups. They were at one point called initiatives and whatnot, but the bullet points are each of those research groups. And the big difference with these 7 intelligent systems research groups compared to the old organization for sure is that there's faculty who are aligned in several of these groups. And it won't surprise me, in fact, to see even a lot of cross-connection between different main research themes. And so the boundaries themselves are blurring. This still gives us some organizational structure that has value, but and certainly has value in the way we project ourselves to the external community. But internally, we are bumping into one another and ideas are being generated and passed along. And so it really doesn't affect our day-to-day operations or shouldn't interfere with, the spontaneous and great ideas that happen by us being co-located in one place. But certainly it is important in order to project to the outside world how we are organized and what are our main activities and where are the emphasis of our research programs. So here's the part where I'm moving on to, I think, what will become educational aspects. And where does the Beckman sit in terms of the budget impasse? How is it affecting us? And what can we do going forward to make a difference? I pulled out 3 lines from that, the piece that showed up in the News Gazette yesterday. And the middle one is the one that I want to really pay most attention to. Clearly, Provost Fazer has identified the problem as the crazy world that we live in. That's the first point. The last point is recognizing that, this uncertainty is putting us in a holding pattern. And I absolutely do not want to be in a holding pattern. I think it's the wrong approach. We have to, if we are back on our heels, we're going to really get run over by the world, which isn't going to stop, and it's going to pass us by. And so the center bullet point really reflects this idea that across the campus, the cuts aren't even. And I have experienced that as I've talked to colleagues in engineering, for example, where basically they've come up with alternative revenue streams and have been able to a huge degree, ignore the fact that they're seeing these large cuts that are taking place. In particular, the ties to industry, I think that's clearly something that Beckman can find opportunities in, as well as something that has been off the table, sort of taboo for the Beckman Institute, thinking about educational opportunities. I think we can be creative here. I think that we do need to think about new revenue streams. The last part of this article, where this was drawn from, really recognizes that the state is going to have a diminishing role no matter what the final outcome is. The state's role is going to be diminishing, and it's up to us now to really be creative and inventive. And I think that we, shouldn't put anything off the table anymore. We, as you'll see in just a moment, really share our the units are on campus have the educational mission traditionally, but they are receiving always a large portion of the indirect cost return, the facilities and administrative costs, which is on the postcard. And so it doesn't seem to make sense to draw the boundaries so rigidly. I'm not suggesting that we're going to start teaching courses or anything like that, but I do think there are creative ideas in terms of workshops or some of our special techniques that we might be able to offer. Again, you guys are all the creative ones and can think about ways that we can come up with new revenue streams that really, I think, are squarely centered on the Beckman Institute and point to our specializations and the unique opportunities that we have. So as a seed, I'm suggesting the plant in your minds, thinking about ways that, we will need to deal with this. And maybe it's most closely tied to strengths that we have with industry. I know in the Autonomic Materials Systems group, we've sent more than a dozen of our PhDs to 3M. And so it seems to me that, and 3M values very much, I'm hearing back from the collaborative nature of those students that end up going there, how well they're able to plug in across the 3M breadth that exists. And it's largely because they've, I think, been in an environment where that's been very natural. And so, I'm working hard to try to say, well, if you value that so much, maybe you should be paying for it too. So, trying to encourage them that way. And all of us have, I think, our own sort of niche areas that we should be working on and thinking about. As well as, I think, some opportunities that traditionally have been out of bounds for us that we might want to try to approach and see whether we can partner with units and make some new opportunities happen. Here's the real effects at Beckman for the budget impasse. It has affected us. We report regularly, quarterly, to the Provost's office and the VCR about how this is affecting us. It's been affecting us in from the standpoint of dollar amounts. You can see over a $500,000 combined between fiscal year 16 and 17 have been taken off of our books, and so that, as a consequence, has resulted in the loss of 6 positions and other positions that were not filled right away, with some putting us in a holding pattern for a while, which I again really don't want to be in a holding pattern. We have to go forward and and find some way forward. And so those are the monetary, real dollar examples of how the ideas that we're going to need new revenue. I don't think those funds those reductions are probably permanent. It would be very surprising to me if we suddenly, a year from now saw the increase in our budget back, getting the total 12% back, anytime soon. So we have to plan for a future that's likely to see diminished state dollars, and so I think we should be thinking about how we can bring in revenue streams. There are ways right away, almost immediately this coming semester, that we can try to affect that bottom line of dollars that we can spend here. And so that was really the whole point of these next 2 slides, which basically show what I think I've identified as a problem that we can address. And what you're looking at are, on the left-hand side, the full-time faculty total expenditures by year, and on the right-hand side, the part-time faculty expenditures by year. The red represents the amount of dollars that have been passed through the units or another institute on campus, and the blue represents the dollars that have passed through the Beckman Institute. And so you can see, for example, full-time faculty in 2014, roughly 50% of their dollars were flowing through the Beckman Institute, and it's trending upward, but it's not trending upward very fast, and it's also off of what had been a target mark for us. And so kind of a budget projection was really based on an 80% level of those full-time faculty who are full-time faculty in the Beckman Institute to be running about 80% of their grants through the Beckman Institute so that we could recover the indirect costs on those. And when you'll see the postcard that I handed out in the next slide, basically you'll realize there is no penalty in terms of a monetary penalty for running grants to the home unit for running grants through the Beckman Institute. And so it really it makes sense to try to see if we can move this line up. I would say even more troubling are those of us who are in the part-time category, because our projection was that part-timers would be running about 50% of their grants through the Beckman Institute. I said this is open for discussion, so certainly you can kick back and say that number might be ridiculous. It was based on a projection that maybe wasn't grounded in any kind of evidence, but it was sort of it was just a good guess at what we thought was a reasonable number for people who were running an operation that had significant amount of space here. Here's one thing I'll tell you I am going to do. And I am going to be looking at, in the spring semester, anybody who is occupying square footage and has run $0 through Beckman. I'm going to basically say, this is not going to be an acceptable path forward, because if you occupy space here but don't run any of your grants through the Beckman Institute, it's really a big drain on our resources. I can say there are a lot of people on campus who want space at the Beckman Institute and participate in all that's going on here. And if you're not contributing to what certainly is going to be an important monetary source of funds for the future, I think it's best probably to think about moving your unit, moving your operation back to your home unit. There's a microphone.
What are the relative numbers of full-time and part-time faculty members?
Let's see. I used to know these numbers off the top of my head, but probably Patty does.
There's about 50 full-time members and about 70 part-time members at Beckman, and about 110 affiliates who don't have space here.
Thanks. Anybody else? Rohit.
Jeff, there are grants that have historically run from the department that are single investigator, but the investigators have all their space in Beckman, for example, partly because of the old model. Is there any effort on your part to capture those grants and at least have a discussion with campus that, well, all the work is done here and it doesn't affect the department anymore in any way, but maybe something could be done to help out a little bit more?
Right.
Rather than just
if it is
transposing.
truly a single investigator grant, at the moment, those are off the table. So, I think that that's a really good point. I'm not so concerned about that. I think we all have a few single investigator grants, but, I think it's really those large center grants that, and I've become much more aware of my own situation and how I'm trying to think about how much of my research group is here versus down in chemistry, and am I getting the proportions correct? And the answer is probably not. I grew up under the mentality of the pressure is on to balance the home unit against the institute. But as you'll see on the next slide, it just doesn't make sense to think that way anymore, because regardless of whether my grant is run through the Beckman Institute or whether my grant is run through the home unit still capitalizes on all of the F&A. The 45% level is the same whether a grant dollar flows through Beckman or whether there's still 45% of the F&A that's returned to the home unit, or whether that grant is run through the home unit's business office, they still receive 45% on the dollar of F&A. And so it just, that mentality that I grew up with just doesn't make sense anymore. There isn't a need to balance, one versus the other. And so, we run into issues of, okay, so everything shouldn't run through the Beckman Institute, and single investigators right now are certainly in the category of that doesn't belong here. But, to the degree that we think of this place mostly as a collaborative institution, there's only going to be, maybe if you're full-time, maybe, let's say, a good ballpark number is about maybe 20% or so. It's true there's other institutes on campus that, may be attracting some of your attention, and so maybe that number 80, our target number, is off. we should get it out of our, we should get that out of our mind and reset and recalibrate to what's a better number. So that's kind of a point, I think, that's worth thinking about where that number ought to be set at, because it does help us plan. If 80% is too high, we ought to be thinking about what's a better number. But I do think, I can tell you there are researchers here who have square footage but have $0 flowing through, which seems unacceptable at the moment.
Jeff, if I may ask, the zero, you mentioned that if you run an individual project, if you want to submit a proposal for an individual project, this is completely off the table. Is it still the case with the new model? I thought that there was something that was going to be relaxed and would allow institutes, both university level institute like the Beckman Institute or college level ones, to be able to run individual ones as well.
So Kara can probably address this better than I can, but to the best of my knowledge, the answer is no. There might be some unusual cases. I mean, art was an unusual case, but art doesn't count, so.
So it is relaxed a little bit, but the premise is still that all single investigator grants will go through their home unit unless they are requesting an exception to run them through the institute. So if a single investigator grant runs through Beckman, it will look at the model as the home unit. Beckman does not receive any financial, any monetary kickback for the single investigator grants, only the multidisciplinary.
So that's true even, Philippe, if the work is done entirely here, but it falls under this category of single investigator. Even though the work is done entirely here, the norm is to run it through the home unit, and because it's single investigator, and we will get $0 off of that.
But wouldn't that be a case where you can get that exception that you just mentioned? If you can make the case that yes, the research will be conducted at the Beckman Institute, would that be the ground for this exception?
I definitely think it's one that we've got to be thinking about, but I don't know. Do you have any input on examples of how we've tried to approach that, Kara?
So I would say, since there's no financial incentive or kickback, so can we make the case of we have X number of dollars that are single investigator or even multi-investigator but single discipline grants where all the work is done at Beckman? We can absolutely look at those. We can look at them from the faculty as a whole, as far as what our projections are of for full-time faculty, that 80% of the work is done here, yet we're only capturing 50% of the return. So we can make our case to campus, but until campus either changes the F&A policy and model and how it's distributed, there's incentive to individual faculty where if it's convenient for them and we can make exceptions, however, there's no financial benefit to the institute.
Except we end up doing the business work for the home unit. So just back to this slide, I would like to make the point that this number may be approaching sort of the steady state value and our 80% may need to be calibrated. I don't know. But in my mind, this number is just too low. I think any part-timer who does really have a serious footprint here, I believe that number has to get at least up to 33%. Our target was 50. Maybe that's too high. But, at the very least, we've got to do better planning, and better planning requires sort of what we can expect in terms of dollars flowing through percentage of those total expenditures. Yeah.
I wonder about a more precise definition of what's single investigator. Is a single PI and then PIs will count, or how is that defined?
Yeah, it actually is defined, I believe, on the Provost's website has a definition of that. It's on I believe if you look at the back of the card that Maeve might have handed you, you can find a more detailed explanation of what that means. And if that's not detailed enough, there is a website that provides that. But essentially what it means is if you submit an NSF grant and you are the only PI listed on that NSF grant, that is considered to be not a collaborative grant. And, you know, for, at least in terms of what would count in regarding, does that belong in a home unit or does that belong in the Beckman Institute? And please correct me if I didn't quite get that right.
The reason I'm asking is, and I'm sure that's very different by department, but the sense I'm getting is that as someone pre-tenure, you have to be a little bit careful in terms of submitting multi-PI grants as opposed to single PI with senior people being co-Is on it. And so this is a serious consideration of having a large footprint here and being full-time here, but not even attempting to get any grants for 5-6 years, you know, as multi-PI because of that restriction. It's kind of contradictory.
No, that's a really good point, and I think that that could factor in, for example, to our recalibration of what that number ought to be. You know, we certainly have had and probably will certainly continue to have a lot of assistant professor non-tenured, and I would say that you know, to the degree that you feel that pressure, we hopefully that pressure becomes less and less going forward as the role of interdisciplinary research becomes appreciated largely, broadly, more and more. And so, but to the degree that you feel that is real, I mean, we have to, you know, take that into consideration. We certainly want our junior faculty to be successful. Don't mistake that, you know, in any way. Neil.
So Jeff, I think there's a cultural thing as well. NSF is probably different from some of the others. So for example, the big IARPA grants have a single PI, lots of co-PIs, perfectly collaborative in the sense you intend, and perfectly appropriate for Beckman. So it is, you know, just depends on the way the agencies run, NIH as well. So I think in those other agencies, the co-PI would count for your purposes and the department's purposes of where to send them, and still fulfill Cephas's concern about having a single PI.
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
If the goal is to have part-timers be trying to have more collaborative grants within the Beckman, what are you going to do to actually support more collaborative efforts and actually get us in conversation with and in contact with other people here?
That's a great question. So I'll just tell you what has happened in the intelligence systems group. As they started to reorganize, and a year now after their review, it became evident that there were groups that were forming that had the potential, for example, to go out and submit research grants that would be center grants or multi-PI grants, but that they really didn't have any mechanism of trying to bring on a researcher on a project that didn't have funding at the moment, but was one that looked like a forward direction that they were going to pursue that had that potential. So we've seeded them in as that reorganization took place, and I think that there are opportunities in some cases to either buy a key piece of equipment that will allow preliminary data to be collected for that kind of activity, or maybe it will be to bring on a researcher who could begin to gather some information or data that would be relevant to putting that kind of a proposal together. I don't know if it's going to happen with the next director, but this cycle, this rhythm that we're in, seems to be very effective and allows us to, I don't know, reinvent ourselves to some degree every time we do a review, and allows for these kinds of interactions that I saw take place in the intelligence systems group, and reorganize and really getting people bumping in and talking to one another and thinking about new opportunities and new ideas. And so I wanted, because that activity was so invigorating, I, have the opportunity with, for example, Beckman Foundation funding and things like that, where we can promote those kinds of healthy activities that will help the institute to maintain its leading edge. And so that's an example of a real effort that's taking place right now that will help us, hopefully, and that's exactly what I said when I said I was going to help to seed those activities, was that, look, the real purpose here is ultimately to raise more money, and so it was hopefully an investment in the future.
Has anybody asked the question of the faculty, full or part-time, why they don't submit through Beckman?
No, but that's an excellent thing that we could do. So I think let's make sure that that's an activity that we'll go find out. I think gathering information is going to be extremely useful, and it will help us get the right benchmark. What is that number? And maybe it's because there's other institutes involved, or maybe it's because of some other reason that we haven't anticipated. It's a great suggestion. Eric.
So the last question prompted me to say something that I've been wondering whether I ought to say. So a number of years ago, and the other reason I can say this is because the other people involved are long gone. I've outlasted them all. But for many years, I was told very, very explicitly in my home unit that the reason I was getting rotten, substandard salary increases was because I was putting my grants in through the Beckman and the NCSA. I don't know how unique my situation was, but anyway, I'll just put that out there as something that might or might not still be going on.
So I think that's a really valid point, and certainly my own mentality from the mid-90s, I don't know if it was incentivized by thinking about who ultimately controls my salary, or who is going to provide the space that I need back in my home unit, or what the case might be. But I definitely grew up, from the next 20 years thinking about, I'd better make sure that I take care of my home unit. But right now, if I talked to Peter about this, Peter Schiffer, and basically Peter's comments were, well, maybe there is some bragging rights. There certainly isn't any financial incentive or gain or loss by running the grant through the Beckman Institute. But maybe there is a loss of bragging rights, and maybe home units, just like to be boastful about how many dollars are flowing through their business office, and that we need to come up with a better mechanism of all basically being able to account for the dollars that the University of Illinois, after all, is getting, and not take so much pride in what's being run through our home unit.
As someone running one of these units.
Yes.
I can assure you that you don't have this bragging thing. because
That's the best offer you could give
The
me.
only thing that matters to us as a unit are the research expenditures, right? Because that's what we report to the SCE and so on. But that takes into account where the faculty members are doing research, whether they're in Beckman or within the unit or anywhere on campus. And to answer your question, whenever I talk to any of my faculty members, I basically tell them, the good thing about this model that the university has implemented is that from a department point of view, it really does not matter where the research is done. So therefore, go and do research where it fits best, where it may work the best for you. And that's the message that we get across. I agree with you that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, there was this kind of, should I do it here, should I do it there, and so on. This is gone now, from a department point of view. From a central administration point of view, that's a different thing. But from a
Yes, it
department
is.
point of view, it's pretty much, I really do not care where the faculty members are doing their research. As long as they do great research, that's the only thing I care about.
I'll just chalk my experience up to the bad old days.
Yeah. So maybe that, yes, that's it.
Okay. If there's no other questions, let me move on. There are a couple of other things. These are some things I think we can all think about doing as we get ready to write grants this coming spring and the summer. How are we going to run those through? How are we going to administer those grants? Other things we can do in the short term, and these are somewhat obvious, but sometimes easy to overlook. And we all just need to make sure that we pay careful attention and do due diligence to make sure that we acknowledge and provide the impact that the Beckman Institute deserves if the research is done here or any part of that research is done here. I would say, for sure, if you're a full-time faculty, it would be very hard to imagine how nothing about a piece of research doesn't deserve to have a Beckman affiliate listed. And probably it's happening, and we don't have really a very good way of tracking. We can easily attract or identify those papers that acknowledge in the affiliate line the Beckman Institute. It's kind of a little bit more difficult to track all those faculty who are here and have published papers that don't have an acknowledgement to the Beckman Institute or an affiliation line to the Beckman Institute. But it is our way of accounting, and it's really important, and it's a simple thing to do. So please, as you write your papers, graduate students and postdocs and PIs, make sure that the affiliation to the Beckman Institute is properly given. This one is one that I think does get ignored, and we need to do a better job of it. If for no other reason, the Beckman Foundation has begun to ask the question of what's the impact of your facilities, your shared central facilities. The Beckman Foundation does provide for our equipment grant competition that helps to keep our facilities up to the state of the art. And so one of the ways that we can assess and do the evaluation of the impact is to simply look at the acknowledgments and see whether or not acknowledgement was given to the facilities. And so all of us, as we write our papers, graduate students and postdocs who are drafting these maybe, and obviously the PIs who are putting the final stamp of approval on them, please make sure that you acknowledge the facilities. The language can be simple as what's described here. And I do think that these are two very simple things that probably most of us are doing. This one may be less so than the other one, but it's something that I think I would really like to see us change. And so the three things that are kind of takeaway, where those grant dollars are flowing through, making sure that we put our Beckman Institute affiliation on the affiliation line of our papers, and then acknowledging the papers that use the shared central facilities, the BIC and the Microscopy Suite, the Viz Lab. Just a couple of other things. So first of all, some of the facility updates, and the first one is what's happening with the ISL. It's basically now been decommissioned. We're turning that space over to the Vet Med College. This was a major operation. I tell you that starting up a facility is a lot of fun and exciting. Taking one down is a lot of work, and it's not necessarily the most even pleasant thing in the world. I have to say the staff, our operations group, just did a spectacular job. Patty really did a great job orchestrating all of the activity of the shutdown of the ISL. And it's basically complete now. The decommissioning of that is essentially complete. Another thing that's going on that will begin to impact us, for those of us who have lab spaces, there's the energy project that the Beckman Institute is one of the buildings on campus that's participating in this energy conservation. It's going to be some disruption at some point in the future, initially just by an audit and a walkthrough, but at some point there will actually be some disruption in the form of construction. It's useful, though. I think it's a good thing. Besides energy conservation, it will enable us to expand the wet lab space. At least that's certainly the plan right now and the enticement for us going forward. And as I said, the very first activity that you'll all be notified of is a walkthrough of the labs to get an assessment of what kind of work needs to be done. The facilities, as I said, are continuing to evolve and stay state-of-the-art. And we have an annual competition of equipment grant that has kept the labs running. The Biomedical Imaging Center is really now a full suite of all kinds of imaging modalities, some multimodal capabilities, from nuclear to optical, acoustics, as well as magnetic resonance imaging. There's been the upgrades to the MRI, the Siemens, from the Trio to the Prisma, which gives higher signal to noise and greater resolution. We have two, if you recall or if you're aware. There's two scanners, 3 Tesla scanners, and one of them has undergone this upgrade, and the second one is scheduled to undergo an upgrade in June. And then the optical CT, X-ray CT imager, the IVIS system, is online as of March of this year. There's a couple of familiar faces, one located overseas but came back for the upgrade, Andrew Webb and Brad Sutton, where the upgrade took place this past May in putting the Prisma hardware in place. The Microscopy Suite is added a new room, if you haven't been down there, the ability now to for cell and tissue culturing to do, for example, to facilitate live cell imaging has now complete. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go visit the basement, room 420. The last year's, I believe, equipment grant involved really expanding and our capabilities in deep UV Raman imaging, and there's also now really a pretty amazing, from what I've heard and I've seen the instrument, but I've not seen it in operation. But Scott can talk a little bit more about the high pressure freeze substitution, which has the ability to really, with minimal disruption, provide great images of cells and a capability that I think will be very attractive. And it's a learning curve, I think, that Scott's been on and really loves to climb. And I think we're going to be really good in the very near future about being able to without minimal disruption, look at some awesome cell images. The Viz Lab continues to be state-of-the-art in terms of doing 3D image processing, putting together spectacular images for covers, as well as some of the images you've probably seen displayed on the video wall, and also a new edition of a high-speed million frame per second, maybe 2 million frames per second camera that is now available for data collection. A couple of other points I thought I would mention. I don't have a lot of news about the director's search. I can say that the soft closing date has passed. The pool of candidates does exist. I would say that it's not impossible still to nominate. I don't think the committee has maybe reached any kind of a tentative early decision even yet. So I think that if you still are thinking about a potential candidate, there is opportunities to put their names in. I mentioned the campus master plan. I don't have a lot to say, but I will say that there is at least, I should make you aware that the campus does have some high-level thoughts about how to connect what's going on campus in terms of, here we are on the north end, how we might maybe have a direct pass down to IGB or the College of Medicine. People are thinking about these things. I think it's good to have this planning. I wanted to make you aware. If you're interested, we can certainly point you to people and places where this campus master plan is unveiled to the faculty. If you have any questions, we can dive into that as well. Another point is, and again, thanks to our staff, the cellular service in the basement had been intermittent at best and maybe non-existent depending upon who your carrier is. But and that's an issue of safety concern. And I'm really pleased with the work an amazing amount of work that went into what should be a simple problem to solve was not a simple problem to solve. But if you go downstairs, if you happen to be a Verizon carrier now, as long as your phone is reasonably new, you'll be able to get cell service pretty much throughout the basement, which addresses that safety issue. Finally, getting toward the end, I'll just say a couple of things that are going on. So the first line of this slide basically recognizes that projecting forward, there are some serious large dollar amounts of building renovation or building maintenance issues that need to be addressed. $42 million over the next 15 years. And that money has to be, found somewhere. And the next line is that, there are some rainy day funds, and rainy day funds these days on this campus are identified as a source of they're just scrutinized. Let me just say they're scrutinized in a way that we really have to be very careful about our rainy day funds and make sure that they are clearly committed. And so given those first two lines, we have a very large planned set of expenditures for maintenance, and also that there are rainy day funds and that they shouldn't be left sitting around or we might lose them. I don't think that's likely to happen, but I think we need to basically make sure that we have a very clear plan for those. We need to begin to utilize them, and we need to begin to put into place some of those items that are in this $42 million building upgrade list. If we didn't do anything, we would be not being very responsible. And so, as an example, we are now implementing carpeting replacement in the Institute. It's going to be about $1 million project. It will cause some disruption. It's also an opportunity to begin to think about how you might want your cubicle restructured, for example, because obviously the cubicles will have to come down as the carpeting is replaced. The carpeting is the original carpeting from the building when it was first built, and we couldn't go another 27 years with the same carpeting, I guarantee that. So, and doing the prudent thing to do is to begin to put some of this replacement upgrades in place, and the carpeting rose to the top of our list along with some other smaller items as well. We are, because of this, because of the carpeting and thinking about space and thinking about using space effectively, we've begun to get some information. I think I heard today we should be getting information on other questions as well, but we're gathering information about how best to facilitate the usage of our space. And now we have results that I'm happy to share. I don't want to spend a lot of time with this, but for example, asking the question, how often do you use the various spaces? Clearly the cafeteria atrium, bridges, and conference rooms are heavily utilized, and so those are kind of the obvious ones. I definitely think the atrium is an interesting opportunity. Walking through the atrium at any time during the day, there's issues of could the lighting be better, or what ways could we use that space so that it's not so formal but still has the flexibility that we need, say, when we have a large poster session. Could we make it a better use of working group spaces? If nothing else, can we make it a place where information to the people in the Beckman Institute can flow more easily? And so that's one of the things that we're thinking about, and another opportunity I think that exists. We also asked about what aspects of your office are most important to you. And the bottom line really is that people are interested in privacy. They want their work place to be quiet, and they want their office to be near whatever their working area is. And so, we're doing our best to try to accommodate all of those needs. Finally, just a couple of reminders. The upcoming holiday party this, I guess the 16th at 3 o'clock will be held, and then on January 11th there is going to be a call put out for the student, graduate, and undergraduate fellows. And pretty much that's all I have for you, unless there's other questions, which I'd be happy to answer. But this doesn't have to stop at the end of this town hall meeting. I'm really, as long as I'm in the director's office, happy to take your questions and field and share with you any ideas that we have or any information that's available. It's certainly been a lot of fun being in the director's office. It's not something that I'm planning to continue. I didn't put my name in for the future director, but I'm learning a lot right now and enjoying it, and have been really accommodated by the great staff that's here, and really want to see Beckman prosper. So I'm all into it for at least the time being. So thanks a lot. Okay, maybe we had all of our discussion during the meeting, so thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great break.